basically what we're always looking for when we come to the conferences, the European conferences, an update on what's new in the pathophysiology and what's going on with the clinical trials. So I think we're waiting for the Rise Up trials that are going to be presented today, so I'm quite excited about that. On Thursday I saw some really nice presentations about the new approaches that are coming up. So for example, the new delivery approaches for in vivo gene editing, which is going to be something really important in the future for all disorders, but particularly for sickle cell disease. With regard to, there was some really interesting stuff about the new small molecule approaches for treating sickle cell disease with a view to increasing fetal haemoglobin, which I find really exciting. Of course, there's always the more clinical aspects about how to manage sickle cell disease that we're always very interested in looking at. We need the long-term follow-up of all of these patients and what the implications are of manipulating genes in all patients are, even whether it's for sickle cell disease or any other disease. And I think what's really important for sickle cell disease is finding a way to get this accessible for all patients. I mean, sickle cell disease isn't just a disease that affects people in low resource settings, and we need to find a way to get this out to everyone, not just to high resource settings. I think what most of us in the sickle cell area are worried about is how this is going to trickle down to the patients that really need it, really, and as well as obviously following up the patients that have been receiving this therapy. So with sickle cell disease, you can broadly base them onto modifying the hemoglobin itself and how we can stop the hemoglobin polymerizing. And then there are the downstream therapies where we're trying to modify the effects of this hemoglobin polymerization. So I work a lot on the inflammation part and how we're going to modify this inflammation, and that's really important because we're not just sickle cell disease is an inflammatory disease. It's not just a vaso-occlusive disease, it also affects the organs of patients with sickle cell disease. So we're looking at long-term effects. So we need to think about the inflammatory state, how we're going to protect the organs from this inflammation and really increase the survival of patients. The other thing we're really worried about in sickle cell disease is we want to prevent frequent vaso-occlusive processes and frequent crises in patients, but we need to understand how we can reverse a crisis once a patient is in crisis. Patients are hospitalized with this extreme pain, and there's absolutely nothing you can do for a patient when they're hospitalized with this pain. You can only give them pain treatment and hydrate them. So we need to find therapies that are going to reverse this vaso-occlusion. And so this is why we're trying to understand how the vaso-occlusive process works and how we can reverse it at the moment. So we have seen in the past few years new drugs coming onto the market, and we were all very excited about how these drugs could modify the course of sickle cell disease, but a lot of these drugs have been taken back off. So what is really important is getting clinical trials that can monitor the efficacy of these new drugs that are going to be coming into play. The important thing is outlining the primary objectives of all these trials, because a lot of the trials we're looking at the frequency of vaso-occlusive processes, and that isn't the most important thing that we should be looking at. We should be finding other biomarkers to look at the inflammatory state, how we're going to, we shouldn't just be thinking about how to reduce the frequency of vaso-occlusive crises as a primary objective. We need to look at it as a holistic, using a holistic approach to see how we're affecting the inflammatory state and general well-being of patients. And that's complicated for sickle cell disease, which has such a huge effect on different aspects of the patient's lives.